Longevity Lifestyle Designers, this is Zach here with secretsoflongevity.com, and this is a Q&A video. I'm no longer just going to try and do it on Sundays because I rarely, if ever, do it on Sundays. They always end up being a day or two late. And I always thought Sundays were a very open day for me, but it just doesn't seem to be that way. So I'm going to do them whenever I have a significant amount of questions built up in my little file on my computer, where I input people's questions that I think would be of benefit to answer in front of everyone, so that everyone can get the benefit of the answers if they are interested in that topic. So I'm just going to do these videos more sporadically now, possibly 2 to 3 times a week if there's a ton of questions I really want to answer, or even just once in a while if there's less questions during that period of time. So with that being said, the first question is from Max, and he's asking what sources I can give in terms of books or recommendations for books for a beginner to start getting into looking into Chinese medicine, or specifically Chinese herbalism and Ayurvedic herbalism, as well as the dietary practices of those systems. Some of the best books that I'm aware of that I own and have read through. I have a small herbal library. It's nothing magnificent. And if you're aware of books in either of these topics that are perhaps even more important or more well known, definitely post the link below in the comments or name the book, and I'll have a look at that so that I can learn from this as well. But one of my favorite authors is Michael Tierra. I'll post his name right here so you can see. And he's got a few books out, actually quite a few, and he's got one particular, the very well known one is The Way of Herbs, and then he also has one called The Way of Chinese Herbs, and the one titled The Way of Herbs looks at Western herbalism, a few Chinese herbs, and a few Ayurvedic herbs. There's almost 400 herbs in there, and he classifies them energetically, gives their scientific properties, their traditional properties, and their use, and what they're good for, etc. He also has another book which is really similar to The Way of Herbs called Planetary Herbology, which has a different set of herbs, but overall it's very similar to The Way of Herbs, except there's just a few different herbs that he talks about and might not talk about from the other book. So having both books on hand is good, but if you had to choose one or the other, I'd go for The Way of Herbs. And The Way of Chinese Herbs just goes more in depth in Chinese herbs. But him and his wife, Leslie Tierra, actually have another book on Chinese herbs. And it's actually a 2-part book. It is bright orange with 2 tigers on it. And I'd show you these books as I'm talking about them, but I still haven't unpacked my books yet from my move. And that 2-volume set is called Chinese Traditional Herbal Medicine. And the first one is Diagnosis and Treatment, and the second one is the Materia Medica. So the first one goes into like pulse diagnosis, tongue diagnosis, yin and yang, the 5-element theory of Chinese medicine, as well as many other topics that you would need to learn if you were wanting to become a practitioner of Chinese medicine, but it's not a alternative to getting a proper accredited, certified education in traditional Chinese medicine, but it's a good introduction to see what you're getting into if you're interested in that. And then the second book is obviously the Herbal Pharmacopoeia, and it's great. I refer to that book perhaps the most for Chinese herbs, and it divides them up by sections such as yin tonics, yang tonics, herbs to dispel wind, herbs to clear heat, and it gets into all the different categories that Chinese medicinal herbs use for affecting change in the body. And of course you can just flip to the back to find which herb you're looking for, and you don't have to know exactly which herb goes where. But it's useful because I find all the Jing tonics are in one section, all the Yang tonics are in one section, all the Qi tonics are in one section. And it's a great way of learning and finding other herbs you might not have heard before in specific sections that you could use as an alternative or in conjunction with other herbs to get the effects you're looking for. Now for Ayurvedic medicine, I don't have as many books on that topic, but I'd recommend The Yoga of Herbs by Dr. Frawley and Dr. Vasant Lad, and these are both well-known Ayurvedic doctors, and it's a great book. It's not that big either, and it touches on many of the foundational aspects of Ayurvedic medicine quite thoroughly for such an easy-to-read book, and it's got illustrations as well. In terms of Chinese medicine also, I'd highly recommend Ron Teagarden's books. I'm not going to give a specific name, just search his name. Again, I'll put his name below and you can have a look for those books by him. The next question is from D. Delmar Smith, and they're asking whether I think humans could live in the wild without food relationships with animals. So I'm assuming what you mean by that is that, do I think that we could live in the wild for long periods of time, even several generations or permanently, without relying on animal sources of food? So no dairy, no eggs, no meat, etc. That's an interesting one. I'm not 100% confident on any perspective that's out there in the diet world, so my perspective is just one that is basically what I choose to consume, because I choose to consume a diet that is as natural as possible. But when I say natural, I don't mean natural in terms of what we're meant to eat or what people think we're supposed to eat, but what is easiest for my body to work with, and also what I believe is going to be most optimal for longevity. So just because something's natural doesn't necessarily mean it's going to promote our longest health possible, because nature actually has imprinted us with the need to die off, preferably actually at a younger age, once we're no longer fertile, so that our children can then take our place, and on down the generations. So with that being said, I highly doubt humans could live for a very long period of time in the wild without resorting to some form of animal food, even if it was a vegetarian form. I think there are definitely vital nutrients that you can't get in the wild, and specifically if you're just focusing on local food, because if you're in the wild you're not getting, encapsulated algae. You get EPA and DHA if you're looking for that, and you're probably not getting vitamin K2 from a supplement in a health food store if you're wanting that in your diet. So yes, we could technically live for a certain period of time on a vegan diet, but in terms of how long we could do that and thrive and actually be able to procreate for several generations, I strongly believe, from the evidence we've seen so far in animal trials with rats, as well as the work of Weston Price, that humans do very poorly on a strict vegan diet over several generations, and just doesn't seem to work out for much longer than 3 at most. Now that being said, I think it is possible to thrive on a vegan diet, at least for long periods of time, in a household situation where you have access to foods from the other side of the globe, and you can do really strict blood work to look at what you're missing and take those things in. The next question is from someone who's asking about what they can take to stop or prevent an STI, or formerly known as STD, during unprotected sex. First of all, I would highly recommend not engaging in unprotected sex if you're with someone that you aren't sure whether they have an STI or not. Now, if you have an STI, you definitely shouldn't be having unprotected sex. Now, if we're talking about how to cure or eliminate an STI, that's a totally different matter, and I'm really not familiar with that topic at all. I do focus my research almost predominantly on longevity, so when it comes to specific diseases and conditions, I rarely have that much of an insight on them. I could go out and do research on that, but it's not something that I'm totally drawn to. And actually there are some herbs that increase blood flow to the genitals, and I do know that that can exacerbate STIs that you might have down there, so that in some cases are contraindications to taking them. So that's it for now. I've got more questions I'm going to get to in the next few days in a future video. I might add to that in terms of more questions if people have questions that are suitable for this channel. And with that, I'm going to say, if you have a boatload of questions, get in contact with me at the drop-down menu below and check out my consultation page. I offer phone and email consultations. And so far I've gotten a great response. People really progressing well with their lifestyle and the changes they want to make, whether they have an illness or not. It seems that what I have to say has helped people improve in those areas. So with that, I'm going to say take care and embrace life without limits.